Welcome, everyone. This is Ask the Expert with Paul Berger and Stephanie Mensh. Thank you for joining us. I'll be your host for this hour-long session. My name is Jen. I'm part of the team at the National Aphasia Association, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping people with aphasia and their families. You can find more information about us and about aphasia at aphasia.org. If you're joining us on YouTube, we love having you. Thank you for coming. We'd really appreciate if you would like, comment, and subscribe. So at the age of just 36, Paul Berger had a stroke that left him paralyzed on one side and with aphasia. In his nationally acclaimed book, How to Conquer the World with One Hand and an Attitude, Paul and co-author Stephanie Mensh describes over 15 years of experiences and achievements. We are very happy to have them here with us today to discuss their journey with aphasia and stroke and for some motivational tips. Paul and Stephanie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So I'm going to pass it over to Paul and Stephanie now.
Okay. I am Paul Berger. Thank you for inviting me. I have a stroke 35 years ago from a broken aneurysm in my brain. I was 36. I was in the hospital for 3 months. I came home in a wheelchair. I lost my speech. I returned to work, but lost my job. Yep. 20 years ago, I published my book, How to Conquer the World with One Hand and Attitude. I am here today to tell you my adventure with stroke and aphasia. My up and down, yes. How to live a full life and have fun. If I can do it, you can do it too. Today, I will tell you about 3 things. 1, rehabilitation with speech and physical therapists. And 2, return to work and school. And 3, hobby, interests, travel, and volunteer. 1, rehabilitation with speech and physical therapists. After my stroke, I wanted to walk. First, I wanted to get out of the wheelchair. Then walking 1 step with the therapists. Then walking more steps with a cane. More step, over and over, more steps. Today, I worked for 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Walking is very important, yes. Walking makes my brain fresh and gave me a good attitude and make my speech better. After my stroke, I have many years of speech therapists. I learned to say more words, reading better, and writing sentence. I go to the Stroke Comeback Center for 17 years and like classes for reading, writing, and talking about ideas. Today, I read books and articles on the computers. Today, I learned to make a new presentations in a few weeks. I am not perfect, but I try hard. Overcoming stroke and aphasia is like climbing mountains. I am proof that you can improve to improve years after a stroke. My aphasia can be funny, yes. For lunch, I order a sandwich. My aphasia makes me switch words, yes. I think tuna, tuna. I say turkey, turkey. I like both. When my sandwich comes, it was always a prize. Now, what is that? I don't know. Two, return to work and school. Yes. After my stroke, I returned to my old job in the DC Department of Housing. Then I lost my job. Yeah. I find a job as a clerk in a office accounting. I worked part-time for 5 years. Yes. Then I returned to school to learn computers drafting. It was very hard. My aphasia makes my, excuse me, my aphasia makes learning slow. I have 2 tutors, one for reading and one for the computer's software. I finished school, yes, and find my new job, drafting blueprints for buildings. I worked full-time for 5 years, drafting blueprints. I have many stories about finding jobs and find motivation and a good attitude after my stroke. So I write a book, How to Conquer the World with One Hand and Attitude. Yes. I make presentations to therapists, students, stroke survivor, family, and other. Now, I have my own small business, strokesurvivorcom. I publish books and writing on my website and make presentations. 3, hobby, interests, travel, and volunteer. I travel for fun, yes, to English, France, Canada, New Zealand, Australia 2 times, Singapore, and Iceland. I have,
I won't.
I volunteer for Rotary. Yes. I go to the Rotary Club in Vienna for 12 years for lunch every week. I am the greeter. Hi, hi, hi. I worked in the Rotary booth for the Vienna Town Fair for 3 days in May. Rotary gave money to many charities. Do you have a hobby? Hobby are very important. I make model train. Then I move to a apartment. Now I like Legos. Legos have kits for every interests. Like that here. I have many interests. I like politics, space, climate change, and music. I read article and watch video on the computers. And I am a uncle and have fun with my nieces, nephews, and nieces. I have a few full life and have fun. If I can do it, you can do it too. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to say a few words now, and then we'll open it to give it back to Jen and open it to questions. I'm Paul's wife, Stephanie Mensh. Again, thank you for inviting us. We were married only 4 years when Paul had his stroke. In January, we will be celebrating our 40th wedding anniversary. Can you imagine being married for 40 years? As family members know, Paul's stroke changed his life and changed my life too. And it changed our relationship in many ways. I continued to work full-time and take care of the house, plus new responsibilities of pounding the system to get Paul the services he needed. Paul's aphasia made it very difficult to communicate. In the early days, most of our communication was about Paul's physical needs and his recovery from stroke. Paul and I are both type A personalities, which means we're not very patient. But we did put in the time and effort to learn to really communicate with each other. For me to understand what Paul was saying, and for Paul to understand me. I believe that this effort in listening, communicating, and really trying to understand each other helped to strengthen our relationship and our marriage. Like I said, 40 years. We've also approached Paul's stroke and aphasia with a positive attitude, a little humor, creative problem solving, finding helpful products and services, and sharing with others. We hope that you will read our books and visit our website, strokesurvivorcom, where you'll see lots of our tips for survivors and caregivers, including my book for caregivers, and some of the helpful products that help Paul be as independent as he can be. Please visit our website, strokesurvivorcom. Thank you. Back to you, Jen.
Thank you guys so much for sharing your story, and congratulations on your upcoming anniversary. What
Yeah.
a beautiful celebration of love.
Thank you.
Give me 1 second.
Sure.
There you go. Okay. So I want to share Paul and Stephanie's website. Let me put that on the screen. Okay, so their website is strokesurvivorcom. And if you scroll down, you'll see some of the books that they have available. And I would encourage you to sign up for the news at the very bottom of the page. I've also put that link in the chat box, and that's just strokesurvivorcom. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, there's no.
Oh,
there's
there's
no-
a space. Yeah.
Right.
Let me redo that one. Okay, strokesurvivor.com. Paul, can you bring us back to when you had your stroke? You were in the hospital for 3 months, and then you came out of the hospital with 15 words. What did the next year look like for you?
First, like therapists, 1 year of just nothing. Like, I would say 10 words, and that's it. But then like practice and like that here.
Yep.
And then also like a physical therapist too. And
So the first year, Paul didn't just have aphasia. He had the other things that have to do with making words, like apraxia and some of the other terms. And so his speech therapist had to teach him how to make the sounds again. And back then, that was before we had computers, a lot of computer learning. So he had what I call the tongue cards that they use for children who are deaf. And so it teaches you where to place your tongue against the top of your mouth or on your lips or whatever. And so he would have a tongue card for each sound, and he would sound out CAT for cat.
right.
And he just practiced that over and over. He would take speech therapy sessions I think twice a week, 2 or 3 times a week. And then we hired a tutor to work with him on the sounds and the words while I worked full time.
And then also I remember like it's like a book, it's like a therapist, it's like I think it's like a 4000 words or something.
Yeah, he had a book of 40,000 words, and they would practice. They were single syllables and double syllables, and so the therapist would pick out a couple of words, pages to work on, and he'd work on that with his tutor.
And so it like me, so like therapists, and then like say what exactly it is, then like tutor say this and this.
The tutor would practice. And one thing, just as a caregiver, one of the things I noticed is that a lot of times the professionals expect the family to do everything, but it's really doesn't necessarily work that well. And so when Paul had his tutor coming 3 or 4 times a week, he knew she was coming at 3 o'clock. And so he had to be ready. I mean, we were paying her. We didn't pay her as much as a speech therapist, but we were paying her. He had to be there. He had to do his work. He had to practice. And it was a lot more efficient, and it worked better because he knew somebody was coming. And having another person there instead of me being his everything, I think also made it work.
I think it's like I think the teacher is like children.
Yeah, we found her from a tutoring program, a tutoring service for high school kids.
What type of tutor was she?
I think she was an English.
Yeah.
She was an English tutor. I mean, she was just somebody who could speak English and could help him with the words mostly, and could make sure that he did his homework.
And so did you have to guide her on what to work on in each of the tutor
Yeah.
sessions?
Yeah, the speech therapist would give homework,
Right.
and so they would work on the homework.
And was the tutor and the speech therapist talking together, or it was going through you?
I think just just
She would just do a list.
lists.
The
like
speech
that,
therapist would do a list, and then he would share it with the tutor.
Oh, that's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that. We have a question in our chat. What kind of frustrations did you have to deal with to get the services that you needed? I'm assuming this might mean financially.
Yeah. Well, one, it's just like jobs. Remember,
Well,
like that.
yeah. So Paul's parents helped us.
Oh, right.
They didn't live in
Path.
town and they wanted to help, so they were able to give us some money. But because we sort of cobbled things together ourselves, we were able to make our money stretch further. Like having a tutor was less expensive than having more speech therapy. These days, you can get a lot of that online, and so, but we didn't have that back then. We wanted Paul to go back to work, and they had employment services, state and local vocational services,
Right.
which he signed up for. And I would say they were pretty frustrating because it took forever to get a session, an evaluation session, and they didn't really know how to deal with someone with aphasia.
Yeah.
They didn't have the right tests back then for some of the he could do computer work, and they didn't have tests for that. I mean, now I know some of that has changed, but they didn't really they really weren't that creative with finding him work. His speech therapist was a better helper for that, and we found a private job placement agency that helped us a little bit.
Oh, right.
But there's always, I had to talk to the doctors and others to get his health insurance to pay for the 3 months in the hospital, because at the time, how much rehab he could have. And it would there's constant paperwork. And I think there still is constant paperwork. And that was something I was good at. I was much better at that than being a therapist or a nurse or an aide. So I could put my skills into that. And one of the things I found is it's to reach out to people who can help, or to hire people that can help to do this stuff that you don't do so well. So I could do the paperwork, but I really couldn't be his tutor.
Well, remember, it's like a woman, you choose of either
Oh, we hired a companion for Paul. So we narrowed it down to 2 people. They had to be able to speak English and drive. They didn't need a car.
Yeah.
And we hired them directly at the time. And then they came to the hospital and met Paul. And Paul got to choose which one he wanted.
Yeah.
And how did you go about finding a companion? Was there a service that you used?
Back then, we just put an ad in the newspaper.
Yeah.
I think today people would put it on. It would be the same thing as putting it on Craigslist or something like that. I mean, there are services now, but it depends on what your needs are. Paul was pretty ambulatory at the time and pretty independent, but he couldn't drive and he still needed help. So the person didn't need to be that. It didn't need to be a nurse, didn't need nursing.
Right.
Another question we have in our Q&A chat. Paul, you're very brave. Were you this brave before your stroke, or did you work at it?
This is funny because before, it's shy, and it is it's it's hard. So I thought, just do it.
Yeah, I mean, before he was very shy, and that now he'll talk to anybody anywhere, even if he can't say anything more than hi.
Yeah, right.
So, and I think I mean, Paul has been my inspiration, but I think that I guess being brave is like just going and doing what you want to do or need to do and not being aware how scary it might be.
In fact, like just now, like it's like hotel, and it's like hex.
Oh yeah, Paul, we um, we went to a hotel in Middleburg, which is not far from where we live, a little resort. And so we wanted to do stuff there that you could do with one hand. So one day we did meditation,
This is good.
and then the next day we did axe throwing.
So
So
I don't know
Paul-
who it is. I'm
So
not sure who
Paul
it
did.
is.
So that was pretty brave for me to be even in, anywhere near, but nobody got hurt, including Paul.
So you like Stephanie, like yeah, good. Like me, not. I mean, is
No, you did pretty good. You were pretty scary. But I think the bravery was
just do it.
he just didn't know he was supposed to be afraid of something.
Yeah, the question is really, it's like, okay, so if in fact, like, yeah, like paralyzed or like speech, but it's still like here, so just do it.
Yeah, we find different ways to do it. Plan ahead, try, and if that fails, try something else.
Or you could just throw an axe at someone's head. Okay, our next question. Did you write books before your stroke, and did your aphasia affect your writing post-stroke?
Before, that's it, before writing, but not like zero. Before, like not.
Well, before his stroke, he actually did write lots of memos for his job in the DC Department of Housing. He put together a whole book on all of the rules and regulations
right.
to build a building. It was about an inch thick, that's what city work is like.
Yeah.
After the stroke, before we wrote our book, a couple of years before that, we contributed articles to the National Aphasia Association, to the Heart Association, Heart and Stroke Association, to our local papers and things like that, just writing about some of Paul's activities and adventures in little articles. And we definitely, I know the National Aphasia Association now on your website, you have a storytelling section, and we definitely urge people to contribute their stories and let others know what you're going through and how you're coping.
Right.
So then it wasn't until when we were finally ready to write the book, I was working for a publishing company, and there's people who helped us understand how to organize the material. And it started out as 400 pages, and we cut it down to 2. So
I think
200.
like, and I think like there, I think it's like 3 years, I think 3 years of like,
yeah, it from the first time Paul sat down to the computer to when it got out was almost 3 years. So it's not easy.
But you say like, like, first this and that.
Yeah, I did a lot. Yeah,
First like article.
Yeah, how to organize it. Yeah, one of our publishing friends gave us some instructions on how to print it, how to organize it, and what Paul should think about.
So Stephanie, you worked in a publishing company, but could you describe the process of getting your first book published?
Well, okay. The first thing was writing, and that meant, because we collaborated, and a husband and wife, the only thing that was harder collaborating on writing was trying to put up wallpaper before Paul's stroke, so it takes a lot of patience. Paul is very dogged and persistent, and so he made us sit down after work and over the weekends, and when we went out going places, to sit down and write. So the writing process itself takes a lot of discipline. Then to have others read it and help you edit it and improve it. that was part of the process. And some people were more helpful than others at that. And then I worked for a publisher, and actually they were, we decided to self-publish it because the publisher I worked for had this really great author who got one of his books on the Today Show. And at the time, it was a great interview and everything, but the publisher, the publishers of the books didn't organize themselves well enough to get it into the bookstore in time for the same day as he was on the Today Show. So he had this huge, cross country exposure, and the books weren't there. So we decided if that could happen to him, we would probably be better off ourselves publishing it, and learn to do that. And found Amazon in its earlier years, and that's been a great place for people to put their books out, and it's been read all around the world. We've gotten comments from Australia and other places from people who've read it. So if people want more information on getting their story together and publishing it, they can email us, and on the website, from the website or something, and we'll be happy to talk to them.
Thank you. So we often hear that stroke is a family condition. Stephanie, from your perspective, how did stroke change your relationship?
I think the biggest thing was that I had to take on more responsibility. Some of the things that Paul did. Also, I became the primary earner. And even though Paul continued to work and find jobs, he lost his professional job. And because we live in the DC area, all those jobs are everyone has to be a communicator. And when you have aphasia, you just can't communicate.
Right.
And that's when Paul found his job as his work as in drafting, because he could do computer work. And that didn't really require any language skills. So I think that was some of the biggest things, were the fact that it sort of flipped our, who was in charge of what. It also made me have to do a lot more of the planning and calling and outreach and things like that, even for travel. So it took a lot of additional planning. We used to be, just drop everything and go, and we couldn't do that anymore. And so that changed a lot of the dynamics. But Paul was such a go person, you can do it person, that he's been very inspiring to me. So
Thank you.
Yep.
So another comment in our Q&A chat, I'm hearing that Stephanie separated being a wife and being a therapist. Can she speak to the importance of separating the two roles?
Yeah, I don't have any patience. I'm a type A. So my idea of, helping Paul is to yell at him when he's not doing it right. So that's why we hired other people. We got a tutor the first year when he really needed help getting around before he could drive himself. I did all the stuff. I earned the money. I did the paperwork. I did those kinds of things that I was, advocating the system. That was what I was good at. And so it also helped our relationship, because when I got home from work, Paul had a full day of activities, and I didn't have to worry about anything except, I learned some of the communication tips so that we could communicate, but not, I wasn't sitting there with homework, and I wasn't sitting there with the therapy exercises. His companion would help him with that,
Right.
Doing his exercises, the physical exercises as well as the speech exercises.
You're right.
And I think that really saved, I think that helped our relationship a lot because I certainly don't like it when Paul tells me, don't eat that third cookie or something. So.
Paul and Stephanie, Paul, after your stroke, what did your circle of friends look like? What was your social life like?
Well, first, like work. Well, I good, right? Like people, I think good, right?
Well, I think we lost Paul lost a lot of friends and supporters at work.
Well, one, right?
A couple, especially, a couple of important ones. He lost some of our friends because we were in our early 30s. Our circle of friends were all having babies, and all of a sudden they couldn't just pick up and go out. So we would come over and have pizza with them while they, while the baby was upstairs, and watch a movie. So we kept some of our friends. We made new friends.
Right.
Some people, had a hard time trying to figure out how to stay friends.
Yeah.
But some were, it just depends. It can bring out the best and the worst,
right,
in both the survivor and in the family and friends. And we found like some people just didn't quite understand what was going on, and certainly after the first couple of months had expected Paul to be back to normal, and he still couldn't talk.
Right.
And mobility was a problem for almost a year. So
what advice would you give for people who have aphasia to help retain those friendships?
Say again.
What advice would you give for people who have aphasia to help retain their friendships?
Well, I don't know, just
well, Paul's a good friend, and so showing up is part of it.
Yeah.
So he tries to stay in touch. He tries to be there in person. He tries to call and be
email, obviously.
Take interest in other people, take interest in what they do, ask them questions.
Right. Yeah, in fact, like this is just question, what doing work or like that or like that or.
Thank you. So we have another question in our Q&A chat. Paul, can you talk about how you use gestures to cue and support your speech?
Well, just now, because like just now the reading like that here.
So show them your
yeah, no, then just like like the coffee and water.
So
but
some,
also like nose.
Well, some of the cues go back to that first year when he learned to make sounds. So when he needed to make an N sound, he would point to his nose, and some of that still remains. That's what he was doing. And for each of the sounds, he had a different gesture.
Right.
Some of them only made sense to him. Like J was this because that's Joe. Like my father was a real gung-ho guy. So and his companion the first year was a Latina, and so when you got to dog, her dogs went rah 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 instead of bow wow like American dogs. So there's some issues like that but so he still retains some of those gestures, but that was part of the whole communication thing, was finding alternatives to communicate as he built his language, his speaking language. And really, as his spouse, the hardest thing for me, we would have one habit of first I would cue him with just a sound, and then he would make the word to help him find the word he was looking for. But so we had these activities, these habits we developed, and then we had to break them so that he could get to the next level. And that was pretty hard. And so we still have some of those habits, even 30 years later.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to talking about your professional life a little bit. Paul, when you went back to work, how did you choose your new career?
Well, this is like government of like buildings, and so then thinking about, okay, what it like speech not, so what? So then just looking like that there, and drafting is like in the blueprints like that there, and so it's 1 year of like that here, of like school like that here, or like more, because so it's more, 1.5 or something like that here.
Paul went to a community college, at the local community college, and talked to a counselor.
And then friend.
And so the counselor talked about the different schools they had there, and then one of his friends took him to meet some computer drafters who were
Right.
drafting blueprints in a firm, and that's when he decided that he would try that at least.
And 5 years and like that here.
And the school, he didn't go to the community college, but they said they would do that too. He went to a private school, but they had placement counselors.
And also like job like that.
Yeah, they had placement counselors who helped him find a job.
Yeah.
And helped him put together a little portfolio and things like that. So and I think the school counselors do that too. The community college counselors do that too. So I'd highly recommend, if you have to make a career change after your stroke, to go to someplace like a community college and see what kind of training they have for people who, English isn't your first language anymore.
Great, thank you. When you started your new career, did you tell your employer and colleagues about aphasia?
Wait, say again.
When you started your new career, did you tell your employer and colleagues about your aphasia?
Well, maybe not aphasia, but obviously speaking not, is not correct like that. Or so obviously I guess probably say stroke. I guess, right?
Yeah, it was a little tough on the phone. That was always the hardest part, because back then they didn't have video conferencing like a Zoom or something.
Yeah.
So it was a little hard on the phone, but the school convinced them to meet Paul in person. And so Paul went there, and for his drafting job, they just sat him in front of a computer and said, here's some work, show us that you can do it.
Yeah.
And that was, once he showed them that he could do it, they were fine.
Right. In fact, like that, like I remember it's like, how about like tomorrow?
He said, can you start tomorrow? And they
Yeah.
were behind. But for me, that was the hardest part. It's very hard for a spouse to call up and say, will you hire my husband? That's it. Just, no matter what kind of job you're looking for, that's really hard. And so we try to use some of the employment services. And what was difficult about them is they tried to sort of sell it like, you're doing a good deed if you hire him. And not, he can do these tasks and help you out.
Yeah.
And so he did some of his interviews on his own, and those were more positive. If the employment specialist could find him an interview, he would show up with a little booklet, a little notebook of things that he had done, to show that he was a hard worker and
Yeah.
that he could use a computer.
And that employment specialist, that was outside of the college, right?
Right.
That was before then.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
But it also sounds like your college helped with interviews.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the drafting school. The drafting school, a lot of times, they explained that a lot of the organizations, the companies that hired drafters, right out of school, they didn't want to spend a lot of money recruiting for the entry level people. And they would much rather get the entry level people in and decide whether they thought they were fit and then train them, continue training them and bringing them up, instead of doing some kind of recruiting and everything, because it was a pretty entry level job. So the college maintained contact with a lot of the local firms. And so if they needed, they got a big job and they needed a bunch of entry level people, they could reach out to the school, and that saved them money and time. And they knew that the school wouldn't only send them someone who fit.
And how long did you stay with the local firm for your drafting job?
5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I just asked about when you tell your employer or colleagues about aphasia, but when you first meet someone, at what point do you tell them that you have aphasia?
Probably, I don't, people don't know what aphasia is,
I think you say you have a stroke,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
sometimes he'll say he has a speech problem.
Right. That's right.
In the past, some of our guests have talked about showing a stroke, or sorry, an aphasia ID card. Do you also carry an aphasia ID card?
No.
Okay, so what were some challenges that you faced going back to work, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Wow. I'm thinking, geez.
What wasn't a challenge?
Yeah.
Everything was a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the first people, like there is like, not, it's either like people say, yeah, good or not, people of like a, like
Co-
a, like,
the coworkers.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it was hard to get to know the coworkers, and everything was a challenge. Getting the desk set up for his, like he couldn't sit at a drafting table. He needed to sit at a desk. And sometimes even before that, getting his desk set up, getting some tools for him that he could use so that he could do things with one hand, trying to work with his
Oh, yeah.
occupational
Oh,
therapist
yeah.
on how to do filing with one hand when he
Yeah,
worked for the
like that.
accounting
That is
office.
hard. It's like of things.
Yeah, back in the day when there were filing cabinets and things with papers and
Like that. There. In fact, like before, like the like ink, and so it's like ink, and so
I
like
think he tells a story in his book. When he first learned to do drafting, the first thing they want you to do is use the ink in a pen that you use for doing the blueprints and for writing, the information, the numbers and rooms and things like that, the description in it. And so he was just at the cusp when they transferred from ink to computers.
no, but then like a teachers say this is not good.
Yeah,
So- and
Paul tried to fill a cartridge pen with ink, and got ink all over everything.
Oh no.
So
Yeah.
then
That's when he put him on the computer.
Yeah.
He decided he wasn't going to learn to do things by ink.
What a great story. What are some tools that you use for communication? Someone in our Q&A chat says, can Paul tell us how he always carries a little notebook and pen and how he uses it to help get his point across?
Well, it just either like me or like people, like that, or neither if like me, if in fact it said like A or B, like writing, and it maybe was like friend say, "Oh, you mean this," or like note like that here.
Sometimes he'll draw a picture, although
Right.
his artistic skills are not that great. And
Or like art words and like that here.
yeah. And he has now gotten to use his his smartphone a lot too.
Oh yeah. So like in numbers and like that here, and you know, like
Yeah, he's a high tech and low tech.
and also like here's like web. It's like pace like that, or like hearing.
Yeah, some things he cuts and pastes into a hearing program. A lot of the websites have a hearing function where you can have it read out loud to you, and the same with your phone.
I think his name is like reading something.
Yeah.
Reading.
Well, you have, yeah,
Yeah.
he has different ones, but
And
phones,
also like it's the oh, what is it? It's that's the name, but it's like information, the hearing and writing.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So let's talk a little bit about your book. So your book is unique in that it offers information from 15 years experience post-stroke. We often get questions about motivation, but during that time, what advice would you give to stroke survivors to stay hopeful?
Just to just do it. It's just I am proof that me that I do it. So you too. It's just just do it. Just it is hard, and I know that also that obviously like rate it's like rating hard. So like hobby and like that, or just so it's like that here.
so find creative outlets like hobbies and other interests to take your mind off of it. And also have goals, even if it's a small goal, but to have reasons, goals and a routine every morning that you get up, you know what you're going to do. You know what your goal is for the week, you know where you're going for the week, for the day. If we wanted to get back to traveling, that was the one thing that we both really love to do. And that took a lot more planning. But that would be something to look forward to. Paul could research it and figure out where we would, where we wanted to go and what to see. And then just having that to look forward to was a lot of motivation. And some of our books do talk about tips for doing that kind of planning ahead. But really, for me, I found if Paul was busy, he was happier. And sometimes they were just busy with things like having a to-do list because he could drive, like taking the laundry to the dry cleaners, stopping by the store to pick up some bananas or something, whatever it was, to have a to-do list each day and each week, so that and to have chores around the house. Paul does as much as he can around the house. He did more before, as you get older with a stroke, some things are a little more difficult to do. But
So I mean like bills. So like email.
Yeah, Paul pays our bills
and
online.
Also, and then dinner,
Paul cooks dinner. We modified our kitchen to make it easier for Paul to cook dinner. And he folds the laundry, puts it away. We go grocery shopping together. He used to do that by himself, but lifting the bags isn't so good anymore with his one hand. But yeah, he so I would say do as many things around the house as you can. And what I learned as the caregiver, inpatient caregiver, is just let him do it as long as he does it safely, because he'll never do it as fast as I can. And but that's okay. If he does it, if he's working on it, then I can go off and do something else.
Great. So we actually have a friend of yours who would like to come on to the chat. So let me
Yeah.
just. Hi, Steve. Are you there? Steve?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good.
So Steve had some very nice things to say in the chat. Steve, did you want to say hi?
Yeah, I have very nice things. Why don't you read some of the things? Because I get so emotional with this guy. I mean,
Oh,
look at what he's done with his life. You know what I mean? He belongs to the Jewish Community Center in Rockville, Maryland. I met Paul. He was always friendly, and then he'd always come up to me and say, "What's doing?" So we got friendly, and we would eat sometimes with Stephanie, sometimes not, at the Silver Diner. So finally, it would call me up and say, "You want to go out to eat at the Silver Diner?" I said, "Well, let's go somewhere else. We go there every time." But anyway, Paul is a real asset in some ways. I would meet him in the atrium, which is a lobby where we can eat lunch. And Paul said to me that he wanted to do a talk to the men's group.
Oh,
That's about 60 guys. And I said, with our friend Ruben, maybe you ought to practice with us a little. And he wasn't having any of that. So he wrote up his talk to the men's group, and not only did he get one standing ovation, he got 2 standing ovations for his work. He's wonderful. Let's see what else. I became friends with Paul along with a lot of other guys, but I'm probably one of the closest. He has many other fans over there at the men's group. And not only did I become close to Paul, our wives became close. So we're a group. We go out to dinner and we go out some places and stuff like that. So Paul, in you hearing his talk today, he is a go person. I learned from him. You know what I mean? I worked with people with different types of challenges, and when I look and read his book, he had to give me 2 books because I had to buy 2 books because I lost the other one. You know, let's see else. Stephanie is a team leader with him, and you know, it's good to have a friendship. I've worked with different people with different disability challenges, and Paul's a leader. And when you read the book, you can't help but get inspired. This is a guy who does it all.
thank you so much for
Thank you.
sharing, Steve. Thank you.
And you notice I'm not his agent.
Thank you. And then we also had another friend. Sorry, just one moment. Okay, we have another friend of yours, Dave, who also says hello and mentions that you're a very friendly and caring person. You always ask how others are doing, and he's also met you in the men's club. So it's so inspiring and so nice to hear that you have such strong community ties. And then we have more comments. Amazing couple. What a great story. But before we end today, I do want to just see what is one thing that you hope your audience takes away from today? And this question is for both Paul and for Stephanie.
I guess it's just, I can do it, you do it too.
Yeah, if Paul can do it, you can do it too. Others, yeah.
I mean, just do it, you know.
Yeah. And I guess for me, my mantra has always been do what I can to help Paul be as independent as he can be, because that makes me more independent too.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I just quickly want to put on our screen one last time. This is Paul and Stephanie's website, strokesurvivorcom. You can also join us on aphasia.org to find more information on aphasia and for any future events that we have. Paul Berger, Stephanie Mensh, the book is How to Conquer the World with One Hand and an Attitude. Paul and Stephanie, can you remind us where we can find that book?
It's on strokesurvivorcom. There's a link from there to Amazon, and it's sold on Amazon. Yeah.
And then
Yep.
there it is.
Yep. And
thank
more details of all the books are,
And also like links of
Yeah.
like of things, of link of different things.
And as a reminder, some of these are available as an audiobook. So thank you, and a big thanks to our audience for being here. If you're joining us on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. For more information on aphasia, to find the recording from today's seminar, and for more information on future events, please visit us at aphasia.org. I hope to see you at the next one. Thank you and take care.
thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.